Greetings. My name is Dr. Waddell Brooks Sr., your host, and this is Community Forum. Ladies and gentlemen, we have the distinct honor of talking with State's Attorney Michael G. Nerheim. He's a Lake County State's Attorney, and we talked about giving you an update on what goes on in the State's Attorney's office and in the surrounding area. We try to do this at least yearly, and we can do it twice a year. Then there won't be any surprises at all. We stay up to date on what's going on, all the programs, and what's going on within the State's Attorney's Office. Good evening, Attorney Nerheim.
Good evening. Good to see you again.
We're very happy that you taking time literally from your busy schedule to be with us on the Community Forum. You're no stranger. You've been here several times. And the people of Lake County know you. If they don't know you from Community Forum, they know you from Channel 18.
Yeah.
It's a Lake County channel, too. And if you're not known worldwide, you will be after this show, because we go online, and Facebook, and you're everywhere. So you will not be a stranger when you get ready to take office again in another 3 or 4 years.
Sure.
You're a great person that Lake County should know. For those that don't know you, tell our listening audience a little bit about your personal and professional background.
Sure. So I grew up here in Waukegan, and I have a brother and 2 sisters, a very close family, and we've grown. We have lots of nieces and nephews, and my whole family's still in the area. We have a family business here, so we're very vested in the Lake County community. And I'm married. I have 3 kids. We live in the community as well, and just proud to have grown up in Lake County, and it's really neat to be the state's attorney and to be able to serve the community that you grew up in and live in. I left for a little bit. I went to college in Minnesota at Winona State, and got my undergraduate degree there, which was a Bachelor of Science. I double majored in criminal justice and psychology. Went to law school at John Marshall in Chicago, and really enjoyed my experience in law school, believe it or not. I lived in Waukegan at the time, and I would take the train to and from Waukegan to Chicago and back, and that was nice because it was about 3 hours a day that I had nothing to do but study, so that was good. And through college and law school, I would do summer internships at the Lake County State's Attorney's Office. So I started in the file room, filing files, and I answered phones, and I think just about any job in that office I've done. I worked with the investigators as an intern. And then after I graduated law school, I began my career there as an assistant state's attorney, where I worked through all the different divisions in the office, handling DUIs and then misdemeanors and domestic violence cases, felony cases, murder cases. Then I left the state's attorney's office to go into private practice, and I had a firm here in Lake County in Waukegan. Did primarily criminal defense work, and I also had a contract with the county where if somebody was appointed to, or somebody had the public defender appointed to them but had a conflict, the courts would appoint me to represent indigent clients. So I've been an assistant state's attorney, somebody representing indigent clients, and then a private practitioner as a defense attorney. So I've been on all sides of the law. And then in 2012 I ran for state's attorney, and after a lot of hard work and help from family and friends, I was lucky enough to win and served my first term. And then this past year I was just again reelected and starting my second term.
This was a very opportune time for you to run for state's attorney because the office was open, which the incumbent decided to retire.
Right. So it's something I always thought I wanted to do. The timing I wasn't really sure on, and then when Mike Waller decided to retire, I saw an opportunity there to run, and I was smart enough to ask my wife if it was okay, and she thankfully said yes, although I think maybe she might regret that sometimes. But so here we are, and running for office is something in a county-wide office. it's a challenge. Lake County is a big county, and I've never really been a political creature, so it's that part doesn't really come natural to me. But the actual job of state's attorney, I love. I love going to work every day. I love what I do. That is natural to me. I feel like I was sort of put here to do this job, and I really, really enjoy it. I enjoy the people that I get to work with every day. I try to be very active in the community. All over Lake County, people will see me at all sorts of different types of events, because I think it's important as a state's attorney. You're not just a prosecutor. You represent the people, and you need to be out in the community. People need to know you. You need to see what's going on in the community, and I also think prosecutors can play a more active role in preventing crime from happening in the first place. Traditionally, prosecutors were reactive in the sense that a crime would happen, the police would come in, they'd investigate it, and then they would hand it over to the prosecutor, and then they would sort of take it from there. And I think while that's important, we can play a role in getting out into the community and preventing crime from happening, spreading education, working with community groups. So there's a lot more, in my opinion, to being a prosecutor than simply going to court.
You appear to be a very great family man, and you still real attractive to this office. It hasn't worn your hair any. Your hair is still
it's got a little grayer.
Not white yet.
It's getting there. Yeah, it's getting there.
Because we got a county-wide position. What is that, about 750 to 800,000
yeah,
people?
That's exactly what it is. Yep.
Wow.
Yeah.
So
it's a big county. It's the third biggest county in Illinois. There's 102 counties in Illinois. So it goes Cook County, which is obviously the biggest. DuPage is a little bit bigger than us, and then Lake County. So, yeah, we're right up there.
I want to thank the Cynthia Vargas. She's the communications manager for that office. As a matter of fact, I got a call from her at 8 o'clock. Well, really by 9 o'clock this morning, to let me know whether we try to find out whether the program was still on or not. So she's right on top of it.
She's great. She keeps me going where I need to be. And, she was the first person I hired when I was first elected, because the office, believe it or not, in an office the size of ours, never had a communications manager. And it's really important, I think, to be able to have that aspect, because a lot of what we do in terms of communicating with the public is done through the media.
Yeah.
And you really have to have somebody dedicated to that role, because the public is interested in what we're doing and they have a right to know what we're doing. And so it's nice for the media to have a point of contact, one person that they can go to. And I try to do a lot of that myself as well, but she's been outstanding. She's been a great part of the team.
We mentioned that you are a person that Lake County should know, but Cynthia Vargas is also a person that Lake County should know.
A lot of people do, right.
And she's the, president of the Latino Coalition?
She is, yeah. She's very active in the community and that organization and some others as well.
Well, tell us then, the mission of the state's attorney's office. What goes on in the state's attorney's office?
In 2 words, it's seek justice. That's it.
Okay.
It's not to oversimplify it, but that's what we do. And it's so important that one of the first things I did was I restructured our office seal and changed it and made sure that those 2 words were prominently displayed in our seal. And if you look at the old one versus the new one has those words, seek justice. And every person that I hire, every person that works in our office knows that first and foremost, that's what we do. Now, justice means a lot of different things, and that's one of the neat things about being a prosecutor is we have the discretion to put into place programs and to handle cases in such a way. Justice in a very heinous crime may be trying to seek the most lengthy prison sentence possible. And justice may also, in other types of situations, mean not charging somebody or giving somebody a substantial reduction or giving them the opportunity to avoid a conviction. So it just depends on the circumstances, it depends on the people, what's best for the community, but the neat thing is we have the discretion to do that, and it's a very powerful tool to have, and that's why it's important that the public knows who's exercising those powers and what's being done. And we have to be transparent because the people are putting a lot of trust in us. They want to make sure their communities are safe. They want to make sure that people are treated fairly, and they want to make sure justice is done, and that's a pretty heavy responsibility.
Attorney Nerheim, in order to have a very successful home, you have to, the sooner you realize who has the last word in that home, you know.
Yeah.
But as far as employment, work is concerned, as far as the state's attorney's office is concerned, you have the last word.
I do, and that's my responsibility. And I also tell everybody that works for me, there's about 140 people that work in my office, and about half of them are lawyers, and the other half are different types of support staff. So we have victim coordinators, investigators, paralegals, administrative professionals. We have a lot of volunteers. We have a core of about 60 volunteers that help us do what we do. But every one of those cases that's in court, whether it's a traffic ticket, whether it's a murder case, whatever it is, every one of those thousands of files has my name on it. And while I may not be in court handling those cases personally, I have assistants that go to court that do that. Ultimately, I'm responsible for what goes right and what goes wrong, which means I have to be very careful in who I hire, and I have to make sure we have quality people in there doing the right thing, and that they know that they have the authority to do the right thing. And my leadership style is I try to hire the best possible people you can, give them the best possible training you can afford to give them, and then try to stay out of their way and let them exercise that discretion while being supervised.
You mentioned, in addition to the 140 people that you have in your office, you also reached out and you have community people involved too.
We do.
You got citizens, I don't know what you call them, citizen advisory committees?
We have a couple panels. So we have a citizens advisory panel, which is a group of different community leaders, largely from minority communities, and it's really their focus is to bring me perspective that I wouldn't otherwise have. We meet regularly. They bring me specific issues. So if somebody has a question for me or something that they may not actually have access to the state's attorney's office, they do through their community leaders. It's great for me because, like I said, it gives me perspective on issues that I might not otherwise have. And it gives people a voice literally in my office, at my desk, that anybody should be able to have through these representatives. So that's been a great tool for me, selfishly, because like I said, I benefit a lot from it. And I also have a case review panel, which is a group of volunteer lawyers. Some are they're retired judges, law professors, defense lawyers, civil rights lawyers. Their focus is on the case review work that we do, the conviction integrity work that we do. Their job is to look at cases where there may be a question in terms of the validity of a conviction, to really bring some fresh eyes to the case. But it's important that they're volunteers because they don't work for me. They haven't had any prior exposure to the case, so they don't have that bias coming in when they look at a case. They're completely independent and fresh, which is important. We also have a program called the Alternative Prosecution Program, which is a diversion program for first-time low-level offenders, which allows people the opportunity to avoid a conviction. And part of the process to get into that panel are there's a community forum or a community panel of people that will, if somebody's charged with an offense and they're trying to get into this program, they go through this community panel and they're asked questions and they sort of have to literally answer to the community for their crime. And it's really interesting and the way that works. But the nice thing is if they get into the program and they successfully complete it, they don't have a felony conviction, so they can move on with their life without having a background. We also have volunteers that do things like at our Children's Advocacy Center. We have people which is the place where we do all the cases involving physical and sexual abuse of children. So it's sad when you have these children that come in and they're going to be interviewed about something awful that happened to them. We have volunteers that will sit and read a book with them while they're waiting to be interviewed, or volunteers that will sit down in the courthouse lobby and have a cup of coffee with the victim while they're waiting to go to court. So we have volunteers that do a variety of different things in our office, and I can't stress enough how much we appreciate that. In fact, last night out at CLC, they had a volunteer appreciation event where they brought volunteers in, and it was just our opportunity to really thank them for their service, because with the staff that we have, we don't have enough people to really do what we need to do effectively. So it's nice to have those volunteers.
You mentioned about volunteers, but you have something, 2 new volunteers that that the community is probably not aware of, and that's Mitch and Hitch.
Yeah, they're my favorite. Well, I won't say they're my favorite staff members because I'll get in trouble. But they're wonderful. So they're dogs. They're comfort dogs, and we have 2 in our office. We're trying to get more, and they're wonderful. We have a black lab and a yellow lab, and they come to us from an outfit in St. Louis called Support Dogs Incorporated. It's just an amazing organization, and they donate the dogs to worthy organizations, and the dogs are worth about $30,000 a piece.
Wow.
They come fully trained. They're trained for about 2 years. So Mitch, we use at our Children's Advocacy Center, and his job is to really just help those kids when they come in feel a little bit more at ease, because there's something about these dogs that when you're stressed, when you're anxious, they just kind of make you feel better. And I don't know how it works, but it does. And then the other dog, Hitch, we use in our main office. We use him predominantly in our veterans court, our mental health court, and our drug court programs to help the defendants feel less anxious when they're in court. But both dogs are trained to be used interchangeably. So for example, if we had a murder trial and the victim's family was in our office, and obviously those are emotional situations, and they need a little extra love. Those dogs are there for them if they want. And the other benefit really has been on our staff, because I talk a lot about the vicarious trauma or the stress that you can experience when you do a job like this, when you're seeing every day sort of humanity at its worst, and you see pretty egregious criminal conduct every day, and it can take a toll on you emotionally. So it's nice to have these dogs kind of walking around the office to help the staff as well in terms of how they deal with the stress of the job. So they've been wonderful, and we try to get them out in the community as well, and they're always the most popular attractions. When I go to an event and I have the dog, nobody wants to talk to me. They want to see the dog. So it's great. And the nice thing is we got the first dog in Illinois, and now my colleagues around the state have been following suit, and there's state's attorney's offices all over Illinois now that have these dogs on their staff, which is great. It's a wonderful thing. I
know one was a member of this panel here. I was kind of a little uncomfortable though, but as the hour went by, then I felt more comfortable. Which one was that, Mitch?
That was Mitch, and I think he just sort of laid here the whole time.
Right.
And you bring up a good point, because I understand that not everybody's a dog person, and sometimes people are afraid of dogs, so we don't force these dogs on anybody. It's if a child comes in and they don't want to be with a dog, that's fine. They don't have to be there, and it's just a service that we provide to people that want it, and we even have a few people in our office that are allergic to dogs, so we have sort of dog-free zones within the office. But it's been a great thing, and we're proud of that.
You mentioned the Veterans Court. You also have a drug court and a mental health court.
Mental health court.
And so there may be this may save some people from going and being incarcerated.
So all those programs are prison diversion programs, and drug court is a true prison diversion program in that you have to be, the standards have changed a little bit, but it's really people that are high risk, high needs. Most people in drug court have been to prison, and without drug court probably would have gone back to prison. So what it does is it seeks to identify the class of people that have an addiction, and because of that addiction they keep breaking laws that lead them back to prison, and they go to prison for a year, they come out, they pick up an offense, they go to prison for 2 years, they come out, pick up an offense, in this revolving door. They're never getting better. Society is spending a lot of money per year to put these people in prison, and it just doesn't work. So what drug court tries to do is really break that chain and address the real issue, which is usually the addiction. These aren't bad people. They have an addiction. So if we can treat the addiction, maybe they won't break the law and go back to prison, and it works. So that's what drug court does. Veterans Court recognizes that we have a lot of veterans in our community. Very proud to have that here. Unfortunately, because of service, because of what they've seen and what they've done, A lot of these veterans have issues like PTSD, substance abuse issues, mental health issues that lead them into the criminal justice system. And I'm proud to say that what we've decided as a system is we're not just going to look at these people as criminals. We're going to try to help them because, but for their service to us, they may not have those issues in the first place. So let's try to help them. And then mental health court recognizes that there's an awful lot of people in our system, in our jail, in our courts that really don't belong there. They have mental illness. They're not criminals. They're not bad people. And we as a society need to do a much better job of caring for these people, because the reality is when they're not cared for, they're going to end up in the system. And the criminal justice system isn't designed to deal with people with mental illness. That's just not what we're here for. So what we're trying to do with those folks is try to identify the cause and try to get them treatment. What the better way to handle that, though, in my opinion, is to even get in front of the arrest, which is make sure that our officers are all trained. There's a certain type of training called CIT, or crisis intervention training. So those officers, when they're on the street and they have an encounter with somebody with a mental illness, step one is making sure that they can identify that as a mental illness and not necessarily a criminal. And that's important. And there's efforts underway right now to make sure that our officers are properly trained so they can de-escalate situations and identify that this person needs help. But step two, which is where we really need to get to, is the officers need an option. They need somewhere to take that person. Because right now they're usually either ending up in the emergency room or a jail, and neither one of those are good. So if they had a place, and there's models like around the country and even other counties in Illinois, where they have crisis centers or drop-off centers where the police can bring this person to mental health professionals that give them an evaluation. They try to get to the root cause of what's going on, and then they refer them to services. So those are things we're working on, because once they get to court, we can bring mental health court into play, but it'd be a lot better, quite frankly, if they didn't have to come to court in the first place, if we could sort of intersect that situation prior to the court getting involved.
I'm thinking about the cost effectiveness of maintaining preventive programs,
Yeah.
and we talked about that before, and I had some figures that were probably a little high, but it's somewhere in the neighborhood of maybe $30,000 per inmate per year,
right.
And the federal is a little higher, maybe 80
Sure.
90,000 per year, because the federal prison is more luxury, I guess, than the state.
Look,
But
absolutely, and
still
those
the
I don't
cost
think
is-
those numbers are high. I think they're accurate, and there are people that need to go to prison. I mean, there are people that are a danger to the community. If people are out shooting people and hurting people and committing sexual assault and crimes like that, they need to go to prison. But a lot of people, I think we could do better at trying to help the people and trying to help get to the cause of what's caused that criminal behavior rather than just throw them in jail, especially when you're talking about people that suffer with addiction or other types of mental illness. There's a couple programs that we've put together. One is the alternative prosecution program I talked about earlier. What that does is it allows for those first-time offenders the opportunity to avoid a felony conviction. So they take accountability for what they've done. They sort of pay their debt to society by doing public service, paying restitution if there is any, getting treatment, seeking a job, things like that, staying out of trouble. And if they do those things, then we will dismiss their case as if it never happened, and it allows them the opportunity to get on with their life without having a conviction, because those convictions will stay on your record forever. And we all know of people that they did something stupid when they were 20 years old, and now they've moved on with their life, but that felony conviction is still on their record and prevents them from moving on. So that program helps. We also expanded the alternative prosecution program recently to include misdemeanor offenses. Because a misdemeanor conviction is still a conviction. It's still on your record, and if we could allow people the opportunity to avoid that conviction, that's even better. Another program that we're just about ready to put into place is a program called STOP, which is sort of a subset of drug court. Now, drug court, as I said earlier, is for high risk, high needs people that typically are going to have high level offenses. They typically have pretty extensive criminal histories. But they get very, very in-depth treatment. What we've noticed because of the opioid epidemic that we're facing, There's a lot of people that have very substantial addiction issues, but they don't really have a substantial criminal history. Maybe they pick up their first felony, right? So ironically, they don't qualify for drug court because their record's not bad enough, right? But we still want to help those people. But they need more treatment than maybe just a standard probation or even our diversion program can afford. So what we have is a special program for those folks that allows them the opportunity to get all the whistles and bells treatment-wise of drug court in terms of the in-depth treatment that they need, because these addictions are so powerful. But it also has the diversion component where if they're successful, they won't have a conviction on their record, and we can help them get on with their life and bring job skills and job training and things like that. So that's a program that we're excited about. And the last program, one that I'm really excited about, that I think is sort of the future of where we need to be in law enforcement, is a program called A Way Out. And that's something that the Lake County Opioid Initiative, that started through the Lake County Opioid Initiative, which I co-founded a few years ago, is this program it's technically referred to as a pre-arrest diversion program. And what I mean by that is, all the stuff I just talked about, drug court, veterans court, mental health court, diversion, those are all great programs. But to get into them, you got to get arrested, right?
Okay.
What if we could help people before they get arrested? What if we could help people before they break the law or break into somebody's car or break into somebody's garage? What if we could get to those people before they come into the system? So what the Way Out does is it recognizes that people that struggle with addiction, because the vast majority of people in our system have some sort of an addiction issue. If those people, almost all of them, on their own decide at some point that they want help, but they don't know where to go. Where do you go at 3 in the morning when you wake up and decide you don't want to do heroin anymore, or you don't want to do meth anymore, or you want to stop drinking? Where do you go? Well, what the Way Out recognizes is the police are open 24/7. So it's a revolutionary program where anybody from anywhere that struggles with any addiction can walk into a police station 24/7 and simply say, help me. There's no magic words, but if they're there for the Way Out program, they will get access to treatment through the police. If they walk in with drugs in their pocket or paraphernalia in their pocket and they turn that over to the police, they're not going to be arrested. They're going to be routed into treatment. As I sit here now, this program's a little over a year old. We've had about 200 people come into the program. These are people that took that leap of faith, that walked into a police station and said, help me, and now they're in treatment. And it's an amazing program. It helps get the police thinking about their role differently, more in terms of we're here to help these people, not just arrest them. It gets the people, the public, thinking about the police differently. The police are there to help me, not just arrest me and things like that. So for those reasons, I think it's wonderful. But more importantly, it's helping people get access to treatment through the police. And your ability to pay, what kind of insurance you have, all that stuff doesn't matter. We will find treatment for anybody that comes in.
You mentioned Text-a-Tip.
Text-a-Tip is another great program that was launched through the Opioid Initiative. And what that is, it's a 24/7 crisis line, anonymous. It's marketed towards youth, but anybody can use it. But you'll see a lot of the marketing in high schools and sometimes in local movie theaters. When you're waiting for the movie to start, there'll be a public service announcement. It allows youth the opportunity to anonymously reach out and ask for help for either themselves or a loved one. It was run by and started by an organization called LEAD out of Lake Forest, Lake Bluff. Andy Duran, who runs that organization, is just an amazing person. And we saw the power in what they were doing with this Text-a-Tip program and launched it countywide. So it's available to anybody in Lake County. To date, and this was launched a couple years ago, we've had 15,000 texts from young people reaching out and asking for help. And what's really important about that is it shows you that if you make it available, kids will use it. That's 15,000 kids that have taken the time to send a text. And these texts are anything from, my girlfriend's using heroin and I don't know what to do about it, or maybe issues with violence at home, or maybe issues with I'm having suicidal thoughts, or school violence, or bullying, or teen dating violence, or all these different issues are being brought up, and these kids are being given access to services because we're lucky here in Lake County. When you think about the amount of different services that we have available to people, unlike a lot of other areas in the state, there are resources out there. But a lot of times it's just as simple as pairing that person in that situation up with a service. And that's what Text to Tip tries to do.
You're also involved in many programs you're involved in, but that listening audiences would be happy to find out about. But you and Carrie Flanagan, I guess, have worked in a bullying program. Tell us about that program.
So we Carrie and Claudia Caston, who is in charge of our juvenile division, we like to go out and go to schools all over Lake County, high school, middle school, grade school, and talk to kids about bullying. It's important to me because I think at the end of the day, a lot of crime is basically old-fashioned bullying, and it starts at a young age. And statistically, when you look at people that are bullied, that are the victims of being bullied, are statistically more likely to be involved in criminal behavior later on in life, and bullies are more likely to be involved in criminal behavior later on in life. Plus, it's just not right. I mean, it's sad when you think about little kids that are afraid to go to school because they don't want to get bullied, and that's why it's important to us to get out there. And some of the stories you hear are really heartbreaking. And bullying today is worse than it's ever been. Adults are the worst perpetrators, adults bullying each other. And really we have this thing called social media, which makes it easier than ever to bully. I mean, when we were kids, there may be a bully in school, but that happened during school, and at least when you got home, you had some peace for a little bit, at least, until the next day. And you had to deal with that bully, and that bully had to confront you face to face. Well, today, with social media, you can sit behind your phone or your computer and say awful things about somebody, and it's 24/7, it's nonstop. And the victims of bullying, they never get a break, never. They're home at night and these texts are coming in, or they're seeing things on social media, and it just wears on people.
It's done awful. By adults.
Pardon?
Done by adults.
Oh, adults are, like I said, adults are some of the worst perpetrators, and it's sad. And I think we see a lot about the divisiveness going on right now in our country, and people are just they're angry, and it's easy to be mean. It's easy to say things on social media, and people have to remember that still has an effect. People read that stuff, and it affects them.
We have a program that so many people call me and ask me about, is that recidivism, and they want to know, will that remain on your record forever? How do you get rid of recidivism? And there are organizations that telling people that if you use this program, you can get rid of it, but it's not that easy, though, right?
So there's a great organization in Lake County, the Lake County Coalition to Reduce Recidivism. Wonderful people. They do a lot of good work in this regard. They have a volunteer help desk where they have volunteer lawyers that somebody could go in and meet with to learn how to expunge or seal their record, which is important because some offenses can be expunged, some offenses can be sealed, but that's all set forth by the statutes, and it's important to have somebody that can kind of help walk you through what's sealable and what's expungible. But that gets to the point why, that's exactly why I built the programs like the Alternative Prosecution Program. That's why I built that program, because you can pick up that first felony and you get that conviction. That's not ever expungible, and most often it's not sealable. So that's there forever. And that's why this program is important, because it allows you the opportunity to not have that felony. You can expunge it off your record, the arrest, you can have a clean record and move on with your life. And it's interesting because some people may accuse me of being soft on crime in that area, but I think most people realize that we've all done stupid things, especially when we're 18, 19, 20 years old. And if you can learn your lesson, if you can kind of rebuild yourself and then move on with your life and not have that follow you, in my opinion, it's a win-win. And almost always, because a big component of getting into the Alternative Prosecution Program, if there's a victim, we'll call the victim and see how they feel about the person coming into the program, or we'll call the arresting officer. And it may surprise people to hear that almost always the victims and the officers are okay with it. They don't want these people to pay the rest of their life. If they can make sure if they're confident that the person's taking accountability for what they did, and that they're truly remorseful and they're truly trying to better themselves, people are pretty forgiving, and they're willing to understand that, you know, if that person can get on with their life, that's good for me
Is
too.
that speeding ticket forever going to be on your record?
No, speeding tickets get cycled off after a while, but I have a clean driving record, so.
Well, let's get back to the office of State's Attorney's Office. Tell us about the, we talked about the mission of it, but what goes on in it? You have the civil division and you have the criminal division. Those are the two main divisions.
Right, right. So it's sort of broken up into two, you know, we're all under one umbrella.
Okay.
We have the civil unit and the criminal unit. Most people, when they think of the State's Attorney's Office, they think of criminal.
Right.
And it also, I suppose I take for granted, a lot of people probably don't know what the State's Attorney is or does, and that's probably a good thing. But you know, essentially we're the prosecutor for the county. So any state level crime that happens in Lake County, so a speeding ticket, a murder case, anything in between, those all come through our office for us to prosecute. The civil side, I suppose the best way to look at that is we're kind of the law firm that represents Lake County and all the elected officials. So if somebody were to sue an elected official, if somebody were to sue Lake County, or the county board wanted legal advice on an issue, we're there to provide that for them. So that's what the civil division does. We also have a child support enforcement unit that does work in that area. And then on the criminal side of the fence, we have the office is broken up into different divisions. So there's the traffic and misdemeanor division, where I guess that's self-explanatory, where they handle the DUI cases, the traffic cases, all the different types of misdemeanor cases. We have a domestic violence unit that handles all domestic violence cases and orders of protection, both felony and misdemeanor domestic violence cases. We have a cyber unit that handles all the cyber crime, a gang and narcotics unit. We have a white collar unit that handles you know, white collar type of fraud types of cases and things like that. And you know, felony review, juvenile, there's a lot of different divisions, and each division is headed up by a supervisor and then has a number of, depending on the size of the division, a number of assistant state's attorneys and support staff that work and handle those types of cases. One of our divisions is the Child Advocacy Center, which is located out in Gurnee. The purpose of that is really to have a facility that's comfortable for kids when they come in to be interviewed, because we know that when these kids come in, you know, 8, 9, 10, 5, 6 years old to be interviewed about something horrific that's happened to them, it's important that that interview takes place in a environment that's comforting for kids. And more importantly than that, we have the people that actually conduct those interviews are very highly trained people and professionals that are really passionate about working with kids. We have the dog out there as an added bonus, but we just also introduced our healing garden at the Advocacy Center, which we raised money from the community, about $100,000, so this didn't cost the taxpayers any money. We went out and raised the money, and we built this garden for the kids to give them a peaceful space, kind of a comforting environment to go to if they need a break or they want a place to go and reflect and feel secure and supported. And we just opened that about a month ago, and it's a really special thing. And it's just neat to see when these kids come in, at least they have a place where they can go. And really, as they go on through life and deal with healing from the being victimized, you know, they have a place that they can always come back to and feel supported, and that's a part of it as well. So we're proud of that garden and thank the community that stepped up and helped us make that happen.
I saw the many people that were proud of it. I was watching Channel 18, just happened to turn it on, and you have a lot of people that were really happy about that healing garden.
It was really, the Chicago Bears helped, they sent players to help dig bushes and do all sorts of work there. So it was neat to see the community come together to support that. And it's important for those victims because oftentimes they feel alone. You know, they feel like nobody's there for them. They feel like nobody believes them or trusts them. And for them to know that the community supports them is really, really important for them as they go on with their life.
Because so the family support programs that you have are not cost effective at all, because you got fund raised by the community themselves.
Right. Yeah. We try not to rely on tax money for some of these. I mean, let's face it. We're in Illinois, so we have we haven't had a budget. We finally got a budget, but there's not a lot of money out there. So we have to get creative. And when you look at the A Way Out program, we sort of travel the country and we teach other communities how to put together a program like this. And every time we do this, somebody will say, well, that sounds great, but we don't have any money. We don't have any funding. And we say, neither do we. We built that entire program with zero funding. There's no funding for that. We all work together. We have all our different, hospitals, treatment providers, community groups. Everybody kind of works together. Our health department, our sheriff's department, our police departments, everybody just works together to make it happen. And if we sit back and say, well, we don't have funding, we'll never get anything done, because the reality is there's just not a lot of funding out there. So you have to be creative, and people will volunteer, people will give.
To reach, I know we reach a lot of parents and adults, watching this program, but what about youth? How do you reach those? You, in addition to playing basketball, I found out you're a pretty good basketball player too, You got in the community and you play on teams there, But what about teenagers in high school? You give lectures to students in high school. Do you have them come to the county and visit the jails? And
sure.
It seems like that should be a big deterrent. When
we do both. We do both. We try to. I think what I found with kids is you got to go to where they are.
Okay.
You got to go meet them where they are. You can't stand up and say, well, I'm the state's attorney, you do this, you do that. You got to sit down with them and talk to them and really listen to them. So we have programs designed to do that. Text to Tip, for example, that was designed for kids because kids like to text.
Okay.
When I first thought of the program, I'm thinking, well, why don't we build a hotline that somebody could call? Well, youth aren't going to call. They're not. You and I might, but youth aren't going to pick up the phone and call, but they may send a text.
Yeah.
So it's listening to them, what works for them, what kind of messaging do they need to hear. But it's also going to school. I spend a lot of time in middle schools and high schools just going out and talking to kids, listening to kids. And then we also bring them in. So we have a program that's part of our office. It's called Knowledge is Power. Cynthia actually developed the program. And what it is it brings kids from the community in small groups of about 20. And they come in and they basically become part of our office for the day. And they get a tour of the jail, the coroner's office. They get to sit in the judge's chair, which they like to do. But they get to kind of see, more importantly, they get to see who we are and what we do. Because I think a lot of these kids have this misconception of the criminal justice system and prosecutors. And it's our hope that if they can come in and really see who we are, they may see us differently. And also maybe we inspire some young person in high school that says, you know what, I'm going to be state's attorney one day, or I'm going to be a public defender, or I'm going to be a judge, or I'm going to be a police officer, or a probation officer, or a court reporter. There's so many wonderful careers within the system, and hopefully if we can bring kids in to see it, we may inspire them to shoot for that. And to your point too, I think if somebody sees the other side of it, they may think twice about going to the jail. It's always better to go to the jail or the coroner's office on a tour than it is the other way. And unfortunately, when we look at our drug overdose deaths, we have kids dying in our county, right here in our county, and we all have to do a better job of making sure that doesn't happen. My goal, is to get that overdose death number down to zero.
Now, do you feel that parents don't know about the habits that the kids have?
Some of it is.
Overlook it?
I think some of it's sort of intentional ignorance, where parents want to pretend, well, that would never happen in my family. Okay. That my kid would never do that, which, it's just simply not true. When you look at the overdose deaths in Lake County, they happen in every community in Lake County. There's no community that's immune. And the misconception that those things only happen to bad kids or bad families,
right.
Simply not true. I mean, you can have a kid that's a straight A student. You can have a family that sits down and eats dinner together every night, and these things still happen to those families, which means we all have to be aware. I have kids. I worry about my kids, and this is what I do. I talk to them every day. We're very family focused, but I still worry because this can happen to anybody. I've seen it. I've sat and talked to parents that have lost kids, these are good people. These are good families. This could be like you and I, and that's what's so scary about this whole epidemic is it's hitting all of us. So parents need to be educated. The community needs to be educated. Doctors need to be educated. Not just kids. And the other mistake I think we all make is we talk about educating kids and we wait till high school, and then we talk to them.
Okay.
You got to get ahead of that. You got to get into grade schools and middle schools and really start giving them that foundation and those tools. And it's got to be more than, simply saying don't do drugs. You have to tell them why. You have to get behind the brain science, how the brain works, how addiction works, what addiction is. But the upshot of that is kids respond to that. And we're seeing drug use rates dropping. We're seeing teen smoking rates dropping to an all-time low. So some of these programs do work.
Mm-hmm. Well, there's communities raising age to, 21 for smoking?
Right.
And it makes you wonder,
I think a lot of that's based on what we know about brain development. They say the human brain stops developing at about age 25. Boys, we take a little bit longer, about a year longer than girls. But in the last part of our brain to develop is this prefrontal cortex, which is right up here. That's the part of our brain that says, maybe I shouldn't do that, right? That decision-making part of our brain, that's the last part of our brain to develop. So people in their late teens, early 20s are predisposed to engage in risk-taking behavior. That's the brain science, and that's why young people may engage in drinking and driving and smoking and trying drugs because they think nothing's going to happen to them. Bad things won't happen to me. Because again, that part of their brain that tells us maybe I shouldn't do that is not fully developed yet in those ages. So I think it's important when we talk about drinking ages and smoking ages and things like that, those laws have to catch up with the science, and our brains develop later than I think we thought they did.
We talked about what goes on in the state's attorney's office, but what about your relationship with the public defender's office?
It's good. We have. I've done that job. Like I said, I have a very healthy respect for the public defender's office and the assistant public defenders that do that job. It's a tough job. It is a tough job. I mean, they're appointed to these cases. When I was in private practice, I could sort of pick and choose my clients. If I didn't believe in a case, I could tell them, maybe go next door and talk to a different attorney. But when you're an assistant public defender, it all comes to you. And they really believe in what they do, and they are very, very good attorneys. Some of the best attorneys in Lake County, some of the best trial lawyers in Lake County are assistant public defenders because they're in court every day, they're trying cases every day, and they're good. They're really good. And they don't get the appreciation that they should. Sometimes I'll hear people in the hallway being disrespectful to their public defender, or they'll say, oh, I'm going to fire you and get a real lawyer, when in reality they already have for free a very, very good attorney. And it behooves us as prosecutors, we want quality defense on the other side of our cases. We want that person to be up to the job because, number one, it's our job to make sure the other side's treated fairly. And we also, we only want to try that case one time. So if we put a victim through having to testify in a case and their defense attorney does a poor job, that case is going to come back on appeal and we're going to have to do it again. So, we want the defense attorneys to be quality. And with the Lake County Public Defender's Office, they are.
The problem is that how does a person end up with a public defender in the first place? They just cannot afford
Right, so what it is, it's
private
for
attorney.
people that can't afford a private attorney. So if somebody's arrested for an offense, a criminal offense, the judge will ask them if they can afford an attorney. If they say no, then they have to fill out a little form that gets into their financial background to establish that they really can't afford an attorney. And then if the judge agrees, they will appoint the public defender to represent those people free of charge.
Wow. Let's just for a minute talk about the expansion of the building construction of the court system. Is that because more people are committing crime and they just don't have the room for them?
I think that process started long before I became state's attorney.
Okay.
I'm sort of inheriting a new building, and I can tell you it'll be nice. I've seen the plans. I've seen the building, sort of be built from the ground up. It will be nice to have that, because that building in Waukegan will be all criminal courtrooms that are designed for criminal courtrooms.
Okay.
The existing courthouse now has expanded through the years, and for example, where we have our domestic violence courtroom, that courtroom used to actually be the jail. So they actually expanded into a courtroom, and is not designed for a courtroom. In the middle of the jury box, there are pillars where you can't, if you're doing a jury trial, you can't see all the jurors. There's a very long, narrow hallway that goes to the courtroom, so you have victims and defendants, brushing shoulders as they're coming to and from court. It's just not a good design.
Okay.
So this building's designed for that. The other thing that's important to me is I'm glad the county is staying in Waukegan. There was talk of the county moving out to Libertyville to be more central, which I'm partial to Waukegan. Nothing against Libertyville, but I grew up here, and I think it's important that the county stays in downtown Waukegan as the county seat. So the fact that they're investing in that new facility shows that they're going to stay here. So the new building will be all criminal, and the existing building will be civil.
And the approximate cost, you have an idea?
I think it's over $100 million.
Okay.
It's expensive.
Okay.
But again, that predates me.
Right. It takes time in the planning.
They started planning that years ago, and the case filings go up and down through the years. They were coming down the last few years. They're starting to trend back up again, and that's normal. Things like that ebb and flow through the years. Our jail population ebbs and flows. My hope is that some of these programs that we're doing now, they're going to take time to establish, but I think we're going to start to see long-term benefits. The A Way Out program, for example, that was modeled after a program in Gloucester, Massachusetts. Now, Gloucester is a small town on the East Coast, but in 1 year, that community saw a 30% reduction in drug-related crime because of programs like The Way Out. And I think we're going to see that here in Lake County, too.
We talked about review cases, but tell us about how the new review, the DNA, tell us about the impact it has had.
DNA's been, it's had a huge impact on exoneration of people that were wrongfully convicted here in Lake County and across the country. It's, it's something where that science has continued to evolve, and, you can obtain DNA evidence on pieces of evidence now that 5-10 years ago you couldn't. Not too long ago you needed if you had a pool of blood, you'd be lucky if you got a DNA profile out of that. Whereas today we have touch DNA. You touch a pen and now somebody's DNA is on that. So that's how far the science has evolved. And I think what's important about that is we have to be open-minded about that. And if a defense attorney comes to us and says, we would like to retest the evidence in this old case to see if the DNA tells us something now that it couldn't then, we need to be open to that, which is why our policy is we don't ever object on those cases. If somebody comes forward and says, I want to retest DNA, we do. Now I think as we move on in the future, we're going to see less and less of the DNA exonerations, because those are sort of the easy ones where you get a result back that says clearly this person didn't do it or this person did it. As we move on, the conviction review work is going to be a little bit, more subjective in terms of we're going to be looking at other types of it's not going to be as clear cut, I guess, is the way to put it, because that's the nice thing about DNA is oftentimes it tells you nothing, but tragically sometimes it's told us, or I guess it's a good thing, but it's told us that you either have the right person or you don't, but it makes it very clear. And we've had some tragic scenarios where people have been in prison for a long time for something they didn't do. But the good thing is the DNA showed us that the person was wrongfully convicted and we can act on it.
And then the cost factor too, right? It's in the papers recently, $8 million was granted. Is it $8 million? $8 million.
Yeah, I'm not sure about, I don't know what article that is, but it's expensive, but the costs are coming down because the science has evolved. We've been lucky, I think you read a lot about some of the backlogs in terms of DNA evidence in sexual assault cases, that backlogs in some communities. Lake County through the years has been pretty proactive in that we don't have backlogs in our sexual assault kits, so that has not been an issue here, thankfully.
Before we end the program, you want to touch on immigration issues, just
Sure.
your knowledge of it.
So it's timely. A couple days ago, the governor signed the Trust Act, which I think is important. I publicly supported that. I support him for signing it. I do so for a couple of reasons. One, I think it clarifies or codifies some of the recent federal court rulings on the issue. But more importantly, what it does is it helps kind of build trust, and I suppose that's why they named it what they named it. Because what we've seen at a local level is the real effect, the negative effect that some of the rhetoric coming out of Washington has had on our community. We have victims of domestic violence that are afraid to call the police because they're afraid they're going to be deported. We have kids that are afraid to go to school. We have people that have witnessed shootings and crimes like that aren't cooperating with the police. People are afraid to go to court. People that have been sexually assaulted that are afraid to call the police. Hopefully this will help build those bridges back up, because all the programs that we've talked about, the A Way Out program specifically, they rely very heavily on people trusting the police. We're asking people to come forward and work with the police. And unfortunately, again, some of the stuff that we've heard and some of the things going on around our country, even in spite of all the work we've done to try to build bridges, is taking us backwards, which, that's why I support that law, because I think it'll help build a sense of comfort in the community. I mean, we have a rich, diverse community here in Lake County. We have a huge immigrant population here in Lake County. Those people need to feel comfortable going to the police. They need to feel comfortable going to court, coming to my office, and not feel like they're going to be deported simply because they go to school or because they call the police. So it's important that we get the word out. There are programs. There's a U-Visa program, for example. If somebody's a victim of a crime, certain qualifying offenses, they're not going to be deported. There are protections in place for them. So word has to get out, and it's unfortunate because I think there is a lot of fear. We're seeing those numbers decline. We're seeing reporting decline all over Lake County, but in our heavy immigrant communities especially. So it's a significant issue that affects public safety.
And also citizens have to be encouraged. The emphasis on National Victims' Rights Week.
Yeah.
It's a national, issue. So people know that they can come forward and.
Victims have rights, and that's important. I think victims, and speaking with victims, sometimes they feel forgotten when they in the system, and to remind ourselves that they're in the system through no fault of their own. They've been victimized, but they go to court and all they hear about are the rights of the defendant and this and that, and that's important. The defendant's entitled to all the rights that they have. Victims have rights too, though, and they need to feel heard, and they need to know that they're supported, and they have a voice as well.
Attorney Nerheim, we have to conclude the program, but we conclude it knowing that we'll have a part 2 in the future, while citizens will be able to see you, and knowing that we're in good hands in the state's attorney's office, and because you're a person that they should know. And we want to thank Cynthia Vargas again, great person, communications manager. She's the first selection you made. You made a good one.
Thank you. Thank you.
And so, ladies and gentlemen, we've been talking with attorney Michael G. Nerheim. He's a Lake County State's attorney. And like I said at the top of the program, he is a person that you should know. We hope you have been benefited from the information he has promulgated to you for the past few minutes. This has been Community Forum. My name is Dr. Waddell Brooks Sr., your host.